are live. Coming to you live as Lichtman Live. Say what's up to the people, Dad.
Hey, good to see you,
Who do you
even though
see?
I can't see
I was about
you.
to say you say that all the time, but you can't see a single person actually.
I can see you.
Dad, we hit 6,000 subscribers,
Awesome. Keep
and
it coming and keep those donations and memberships.
and
That's what we need to keep us on the air.
your interview with Laura Coates is at 1.7 million views. Pretty good, huh?
Yeah, if we could just get 10% of them to
I
be
know.
members, we'd be rolling.
I know. I don't know why there's not a
Even
translation.
1%,
I
it would be 1,700.
I have no idea why it's not translating to this channel, but oh well. We're here for the people, Dad. That's what we're here for. We're here to answer questions. What's on your mind this week, Dad?
Well, obviously, on my mind is the New York City Trump trial. According to many commentators, who are always wrong, of course, this will be the only trial of Donald Trump, that somehow he'll have managed to delay the other three sets of indictments that are against him until after the election, with a great deal of help from the Supreme Court and from the judge he appointed down in Florida, Judge Aileen Cannon, who seems to be slow walking everything for no reason. You know, the judge in New York, he decides motions on the spot. She lets them pile up and then claim, oh, we have to delay because we have all these motions, which she could have dealt with easily because they're all frivolous for the most part. She could have dealt, even if they're not frivolous, she should have dealt with them months ago and kept the trial on schedule. It's just unbelievable how the judicial system is failing. It's failing its most important test. Can it hold a former president and a presumptive major party candidate accountable? Except for the New York City trial, the sad answer seems to be absolutely not. You know, if any ordinary citizen had done 1/10 of what Trump is accused of, they'd be in jail faster than you could say Barron Trump. But somehow Trump, you know, as he's done for over 50 years, manages to manipulate the system in his favor. That said, so far, and we haven't heard from the defense, and they may not put on any witnesses. I don't know who they would, but somehow, at least so far, the trial in New York City is going very, very poorly for Donald Trump. The prosecution has developed a whole series of very damning facts: that Trump is a micromanager, that he signed the checks reimbursing Michael Cohen, even though there was no legal retainer agreement. They even have handwritten notes from his chief financial officer explaining how Michael Cohen would be paid off. We have testimony from Trump loyalists saying nothing goes by him. You know, he is so frugal, he scrutinizes every expenditure, including a $650 expenditure for a picture frame, and that he will send checks back void if he doesn't agree with the expenditure. And so, quite clearly, Donald Trump knew exactly what he was doing in reimbursing Michael Cohen, not for non-existent legal expenses. There was no retainer, but clearly, as indicated by the handwritten notes of Alan Weisselberg and others, clearly paying him back for paying off Stormy Daniels for the hush money. And again, you know, the media has gotten better, but it's still not very good. There's still a great deal of even mainstream media commentary, which continues to call it the hush money case. It's not a hush money case. It's a fraud case. Trump is being charged with falsifying business records to illegally attribute the payoff to legal expenses, and thereby defrauding the American voter and the government that collects taxes. It's not a hush money case, and I do not fathom why so many in the media continues to call it that. Stormy Daniels' testimony was devastating, and the defense, and again, misguided commentators are complicit in this. They say, well, it's all irrelevant. It shouldn't have been given it has nothing to do with the case, which is a business case. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Her testimony has everything to do with the case in two regards. Number one, as the judge himself pointed out in denying the defense claim for a mistrial on the basis of her testimony, he said, you, the defense, opened the door in your opening statement. You know how they did that, Sam?
No.
How they opened? They said the supposed encounter never took place. And the judge said, you've opened the door for her to give details of the encounter to establish the credibility of what she's saying. You can't now claim that what she's saying is just prejudicial and irrelevant when you yourself created the relevance of her testimony by claiming the encounter never existed. Not only did Trump claim that outside the courtroom, but you claim that within this very courtroom, right in front of this jury, making all of these details quite relevant. And as the prosecution pointed out, in fact, we had a lot more details that we could have presented, but we decided to not to. For example, how it felt for her to have a 60-year-old man, on top of her trying to have sex. We kept that out. We just let in enough details to corroborate. Remember, she was 27 at the time, so he was more than twice, 33 years older than her, more than twice her age. Secondly, and perhaps even more important, it's centrally relevant because this is the story that Trump didn't want to come out. It wasn't just some random charge, oh, I had sex with the guy. It is detailed, incredibly embarrassing account of what happened in that hotel room in 2006. And exactly what happened in that hotel room is centrally relevant to the case because it provides the powerful motive for Donald Trump to pay her off before the election. And I have to say, I was amazingly surprised. I've been in 110 cases. I've been cross-examined by the best lawyers in the country. I know what good cross-examination is, and I know, when you've really drawn blood from the witness. This was awful cross-examination. First of all, it was way too long. You get in and out with a few critical points that really undermine the witness, but droning on for hours is absolutely of no use. Secondly, the second rule of good cross-examination is the cross-examiner must be in control. And here the cross-examiner completely relinquished control. She had nothing on Stormy Daniels. She would say things like, didn't you say, that Trump surely, must be in jail? And Stormy said, show me the proof. She showed her a tweet and it didn't say anything like that. And time and again, she'd say, didn't you change your story? And Daniels would say, no, I didn't. And, the only thing she went on for 7 pages about whether they ate food at that dinner or not as a supposed contradiction. And Stormy said, look, yeah, we had dinner, but, I didn't eat. I wasn't, didn't have an appetite. If that's the worst contradiction after 18 years that you can come up with. And then she kind of implied, well, as a porn star, you couldn't possibly have been put off by this encounter, implying as a porn star, you should be open to any kind of sex, no matter how reprehensible it is. And she had a great response. No, I was not ready to see a 60-year-old man sitting on a bed in his underwear and then blocking my path to go out. That has nothing to do with my being a porn star. And then the attorney said, well, as a porn star, aren't you used to making up stories about sex? And she said, no, sex is real. That's why you call it pornography. And moreover, if I made this up, I'd make up a much better story than this one. And, so I thought that Stormy Daniels really took control of the cross. It was just a disaster for the defense. And I'm not surprised that the judge declined to grant them a mistrial. I'm also puzzled by the defense strategy. They seem to be saying two contradictory things. One, this never happened. Trump doesn't know this person. He had nothing to do with this payoff. It was all Michael Cohen, but he made this payoff because he wanted to protect his family. They can't both be true simultaneously. He can't have not been involved and not made the payoff and then made the payoff to protect his family, not to protect his campaign. And there is a host of devastating testimony about the crisis the campaign went into and about how it was only after the release of the Hollywood Access tape that they became desperate to silence Stormy Daniels. And by the way, you know, the notion that he's this great family man who wanted to protect his family, and yet in an open mic brags about grabbing women by their private parts, assaulting women while he's married, chasing down another married woman to try to have sex with her. That's not exactly the image of a family man concerned about protecting his family. So I don't know, you know, who they're going to put on the stand. It beats me. Donald Trump is the only one who can get up and deny all these things. But, you know, the most explosive testimony is yet to come. And who's that, Sam?
Michael
Come on.
Cohen?
Michael Cohen.
Yes, got it.
Yes, you got it. The guy at the center, you know, Stormy Daniels was important, but, you know, Michael Cohen is at the center of this. But there are other things that are happening, of course, right?
Of course.
Joe Biden made an important statement saying, look, this notion of going into Rafah and killing maybe tens of thousands of more Palestinians is incredibly unwise. You're just turning the whole world against Israel, you know. And unfortunately, you know, Biden has to deal with Netanyahu, who's not Biden's guy. He's the Donald Trump of Israel. He was promoted by the American right wing and Donald Trump, not by Joe Biden. And Biden did the right thing. He said, we're not going to give you, we'll give you what you need for your defense, but we're not going to give you what you need to invade Rafah. And we're going to continue to work as hard as we can to have a ceasefire and release of the hostages. So what does Trump say? Do you know?
No, I don't really, I haven't been really following much in the news lately.
Oh, shame on you. Good thing you're listening to me on this show.
Right. I'm learning right now. What do I need to check in for the news for?
So you consider yourself Jewish, right?
Yes.
I'm Jewish. Your mom is not by heritage Jewish, but is the greatest Jewish mother we've ever known. So what does Trump say? You can't be a good Jew if you vote for the Democrats. Something he said before, as if Donald Trump is the arbiter of who's a good Jew and who's not a good Jew. You know, a guy who wouldn't know the Old Testament from a pornographic novel. You know, it's just astounding. And a guy who's traded in anti-Semitism. What did he say about those demonstrators in Charlottesville who were chanting, Jews will not replace us, Sam?
They're good people on both sides.
Fine people, yeah. Fine people among the neo-Nazis. And who has Trump and his allies blamed for everything that goes wrong in America?
George Soros.
One guy, George Soros, a Jewish Holocaust survivor. It's, you know, one of the oldest, worst anti-Semitic memes that somehow there are these Jewish masterminds trying to control the country. And of course, the idea that Jews can't vote for Biden because of his policy towards Israel, as if he's got to kowtow to Biden for Jews, is another old anti-Semitic meme that Jews are not loyal to the United States. They're only loyal to a foreign country. And of course, you know, this Soros attack is just incredibly scurrilous. Trump and his allies have accused Bragg, the prosecutor in New York, of being bought and sold by Soros. And what did Soros say? I've never met the guy. I've never talked to the guy. I'd never directly contributed to his campaign. I contributed to a political action committee like I do to many who then contributed to his campaign, but I had nothing to do with it directly and personally. And worse things have come from Trump's allies about Soros. I want to read you a couple of things. This is a high official in Texas, a big Trump supporter, the agriculture commissioner, Sid Miller. In 2020, during the campaign, he posted a picture of Soros with the caption, "This man is pure evil." He then claims the following fabrication came from Soros. Quote, "Climate change didn't work. Impeachment didn't work. The virus didn't work. So start the race war." A Republican county chair wrote of Soros, "I pay white cops to murder black people, and then I pay black people to riot because race wars keep the sheep in line." That comes right out of the playbook of Southern segregationists during the notorious era of Jim Crow discrimination, who blamed Jews for, inciting blacks to undermine law and order. And you needed, the all-white police and prosecutors and judges to keep them in mind. So it is astounding, that Donald Trump should be claiming to be the arbiter of how Jews should vote.
Okay. Everything off your mind so far, Dad? You ready for some questions?
I am always ready for questions. I have more to say, but I'll wait for questions because you told me we have a lot of them.
Yes.
And we want to encourage people to become members and donate.
And I'm sure some of your thoughts will come out in the questions too, right?
They always do.
Let me till you've got too much headroom, Dad. You're like sinking down into there you go.
Yeah, when you're my size, you definitely don't want to sink down, do you?
Right, you're like a giant, right?
How's that?
Good enough. Let's get to the questions. Cameron Kerr with a $20 donation. Thank you so much, Cameron. Floor with a $4 donation. They say $5 donation. They say if Russia's failure in Ukraine is not foreign military success, what extraordinary event should happen in the next few months for Biden to win that key?
I don't like to speculate and I don't like to give hypotheticals, but I do like to try to answer the questions of our loyal donors and members. And what would turn the success key would be a successful counteroffensive by the Ukrainians this spring.
All right. The Alex Treefire says, I fear that the error of the prosecution 2 days ago may result in Trump winning on appeal. What do you think about that, Dad?
I'm not sure what era they're talking about. Can you be more specific? I didn't notice any appealable error.
We'll come back to that, Alex, if you want to comment
below. I
below.
guess what they're arguing is, bringing out these salacious details. But as I explained, one, the defense opened the door to that, and two, it's central to the case. So I don't see how that sustains an appeal. They referred to the Harvey Weinstein appeal, but that was totally different. He brought in all these other women who had nothing to do with the case at hand. Every witness who this prosecution has brought in is centrally related to the case. They even said, we're not going to call Karen McDougal, the other woman who alleged not just a one-night stand, but a 10-month affair with Trump and was paid off by David Pecker. They're not calling her. So they're not calling anyone, like in the Weinstein case, outside the parameters.
Who is Weinstein?
Weinstein?
Yeah. Harvey Weinstein? Oh,
I like that better.
You like Weinstein better?
Yeah.
Okay. Real American 73 asks, if RFK was polling where he is right now by October, would that turn the key, or does RFK have to improve in polling from this point?
He at least has to stabilize and likely improve. I've seen him all over the map. The latest polls have him under the 10%, but that doesn't mean much. Some earlier ones had him at 15, but the latest polls I've saw had him between 3 and 9. And I'm not sure his confession that a parasitic worm ate part of his brain is going to help him.
Yeah. Dad, we have 335 people watching, but only 107 likes. So if you're watching, give us a like, subscribe, and also turn on our notifications. I don't think I've ever said this. If you turn on our notifications, it'll notify you when we're going live. So don't forget to do that as well. Ian Matheru asks, are you glad you ran for the U.S. Senate in 2006? What lessons did you take away from the experience?
was the biggest mistake of my life. You know, as you can see, I love talking about issues, but I was never very good in talking about myself, which is the most important requisite of a successful politician. I also totally misjudged Maryland politics. I thought there would be room for an outsider, for someone who offered different experience and different perspectives. I found otherwise. You know, the Democratic Party, which I criticized in my campaign, was totally closed to anyone outside the club.
Patrick Murray asks, with the anniversary of George Floyd's murder approaching, can you do a special stream about racism in the United States / police brutality?
We'll certainly take that under advisement. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, maybe not a whole stream, but
yeah,
you know, we can maybe start the episode and I can bring it up, and you know, you can have some time in the beginning to talk about racism and police brutality if you see so fit, Father.
I can talk about that.
Do you believe that Trump's refusal to comply with the gag order could possibly taint the unsequestered jury?
It's a good question. It's not impossible. You know, they're not supposed to watch or listen to anything, but who knows whether they comply with that. And Trump's comments are so unhinged, they may backfire on him. And they're also a broken record. You know, every case against him is a witch hunt. It's Joe Biden or some other Democrat out to get him. And this would have to be the biggest conspiracy in the history of the country. Because think of all the cases he's lost. Trump University, right? The Trump charity. Trump's organization being found criminally liable. The E. Jean Carroll case. The New York City real estate fraud case, just to name 5 of them. You know, so all of these things would have to be some big conspiracy against him, even though in most of these cases he either had to settle, or in the case of E. Jean Carroll, twice he had a jury find against him.
Mike DeNicola says, hey, Allan and Sam, the campus protests seem to have cooled down a bit from the last 2 weeks, with some encampments clearing out. How does the Social Unrest Key look as of today?
It's looking, you know, less shaky. You know, before the campus protests, I thought it was quite solid. The campus protests made it shaky. But as I think I explained last week, there's no remote comparison yet, and I don't expect it to be, between what's going on now and what went on in the 60s and 70s with the cities inflamed, with students shot and killed at Kent State and Jackson State, with hundreds of thousands of students protesting, millions of Americans protesting. I'd be really surprised to see it grow to that extent. What I am a little worried about and have to watch is the fact that there are so many involved in this who aren't students and may have ties to extremist groups. We're not sure about that, and who may instigate violence at the Democratic Convention, which ironically, as in 1968, is being held in Chicago as well, which I don't fathom.
I did see some polling this week that said that, you know, something like 98% of college students, even at the universities that were involved, you know, had no direct involvement in the encampment. So it's a very, very tiny percentage, even of students at these universities who are engaging in these protests.
You're absolutely right. We had talked last time, I think there were 6,000 colleges and universities, and like 50, less than 1% were involved. And on those campuses, less than 1% of the students were involved. So we're talking about a minuscule, you know, almost incalculably small percentage of students involved in this, unlike the 60s and 70s.
Alexander Dulforce says, Merrick Garland catches a lot of flack for obvious reasons. Should Christopher Wray catch some too?
Yeah. I mean, the buck stops here. Merrick Garland is the head of the Justice Department, which includes the FBI. And he has, you know, as I said, you've heard me say this, he's my old buddy. I've known him since the 60s. I thought he was one of the greatest, maybe the best federal judge while he sat on the bench in the DC Court of Appeals. But he's an abysmal attorney general. He sat on the January 6th case for over a year and a half. It happened in January 2021. He waited more than a year and a half even to appoint a special counsel while he's prosecuting all these small fries that nobody cares about. It's like prosecuting the street corner dealers and leaving out the bosses and the money launderers of the cartels. It's just unconscionable. And had he acted promptly, then all of these delays wouldn't matter because they would be occurring last year, and you wouldn't be able to put it off until after the election. So if in fact none of these trials, other than the state one in New York, come to fruition before the election, then I think Merrick Garland deserves a lot of blame, along with the Florida judge and the U.S. Supreme Court.
We touched on this a little bit in the intro, but Alex Biard says Fox started covering the trial more. Once Daniels began testifying, they started to spin it as her as a wild card witness who turns the courtroom into a joke. Absurd. Is this effective on public opinion?
Oh, it's hard to know because the public doesn't see it. Unfortunately, unlike the OJ trial, which some of us old folks were riveted on way back in the 90s, this is not televised, so people aren't directly seeing it, and they got to get it from news outlets, and the people who watch Fox News are going to get the Fox News spin, and people who watch MSNBC will get the MSNBC spin on it. But the notion that she's a wild card, as I explained, is utterly false, because the defense opened the door and because her testimony explains the motivation.
Right. Captain M90s asks, has Biden lost the foreign failure keys since the issues in Rafah and Israel?
Not even close. I don't understand why that's a foreign policy failure. It was the right thing to do. And it's to the benefit of Israel. Israel only hurts itself by killing more and more civilians and creating more suffering in Gaza. It's already turned much of the world against it. The last thing the Jews in Israel want to be is standing alone. And, they got some sympathy after the Iranian missile attack that they foiled. And Netanyahu, and I have nothing good to say about Netanyahu, by the way. He's the Donald Trump of Israel. He makes all the same mistakes Donald Trump does. And Netanyahu seems absolutely determined to make Israel an international pariah. And that is a crying shame.
Axel Moreno with a $10 donation. I apologize, Axel, if I mispronounced your name in the past. They say, I just graduated today from Texas State University, LBJ's alma mater. Thank you both for helping me pass the time while doing machine learning research on major events. Congrats on graduating, Axel. Dad?
Yeah, congrats. And God, machine learning is way over my head. Only Sam understands that stuff.
Incorrect. Thank you, Susan Clark and Mary Lou, for your donations. MD asks, the announcement of RFK's brain parasite yesterday may affect his campaign. Do we think he will not win 5% of voters given this news? Is there any way to gauge if he remains a third-party threat?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, you can only know if they get 5% or more after the election, but I got to make my prediction before the election. So this is the only time I draw in the polls because I have nothing else to do with respect to the third party. But I don't take the polls at face value. I have the Lichtman wasted vote syndrome. We may love you, Ross Perot, who polled almost 40% and got 19, but you can't win, so we're not going to vote for you. So I take the polling numbers and cut them in half. So RFK Jr. has to be polling at 10% or more, and I'd be surprised if we get closer to my prediction time if that's the case. I'm not ruling it out. I'm just saying I would be surprised. The key is shaky, but I still think it leans in favor of the White House party.
Super X 111 asks, would Hillary Clinton win 6 or more keys to the White House had the popular vote consideration applied, and which keys?
It's irrelevant. The keys are the keys. She lost 6 or 7 keys, and that was it.
Thank you, Vernus Carby, for your donation and their first super chat on our live stream.
Nice.
Are you worried, Dad, that there might be a hung jury in the Trump trial?
Yes, I am. I'm always worried about a hung jury. That's what happened in the John Edwards trial. Everyone says, oh, John Edwards was acquitted. No, he wasn't. He was acquitted of 1 count, but another count was a hung jury. Hung jury is not an acquittal. It's just what it says. It's neither an acquittal nor a conviction, and he could be tried again. And the problem is it just takes one holdout juror to hang the jury, because under American jurisprudence, it's got to be unanimous, 12-0. So yes, a holdout juror is a worry, but it didn't happen in the E. Jean Carroll trial, even though apparently there was some Trump supporters on the jury, and it didn't move them. They went with the facts of the case. So I'm hoping this jury will go with the facts of the case, and neither, vote because they hate Trump or love him.
Cameron Kerr.
By the way, one of the things that Susan Nicklish, the defense attorney, brought out was that Stormy Daniels admitted she hates Trump. And again, the foolish commenters, oh my God, she admitted she hates Trump. That was an honest answer. That added to her credibility, didn't detract from it. If she said, no, I don't hate Trump, that would have looked so disingenuous. Anyone who was put through what Trump put her through would, of course, say they hate him. It's only natural. And, not every witness is going to be buddy-buddy with Trump. A lot of the witnesses are going to be people who are victims of Trump. That's true of any trial. You think in a drug case, they don't put the victims of the cartel who hate them on the stand? Of course they did. Who broke the mafia? Sammy the Bull Gravano, their loyal executioner who had committed God knows how many murders. And, it was an inside player.
Cameron Kerr says, just saw that Hunter Biden's trial for the gun charges will begin next month. If he's convicted, does that turn the scandal key?
No, Hunter Biden's not the president. He's not running for president. If you read the book, you'll see, and the new book's coming out in July, the scandal key has to directly touch the president. Billy Carter, Jimmy Carter's brother, all of his transgressions did not turn the scandal key against the very moral Jimmy Carter. And, in Biden, you have someone, they've tried to pin a scandal on Biden for God knows how long, at least 4, 5, 6 years, and have come up with nothing. In fact, their so-called smoking gun witness was arrested for lying to the FBI about the supposed bribes to Joe Biden and Hunter. And it turns out, where did he get that lie from, Sam?
Russia or something.
Russia intelligence services. As Fiona Hill, Trump's own former national security expert on Russia and Eastern Europe, testified that a lot of what Giuliani and other Trump allies and Trump were putting out directly came from the Russian intelligence service. Lev Parnas, a Ukrainian who had been recruited by Giuliani to spread these lies, testified about the same thing.
Unrelated, Dad, the Cavs beat the Celtics tonight.
What?
Yeah, I know. They crushed them.
Love it.
They beat them.
I love it.
They beat them 118-94.
They beat them by 24 points? Wow.
Anyways.
So maybe that'll be a real series. I'd love for the Cavs to knock off the Celtics and the Knicks to knock off those whining Pacers. Oh, my God. Enough whining about the referees. You had 17 free throws. Not counting the technical fouls, the Knicks had 20. They had 17 free throws, and they missed 7. The refs didn't make them miss those 7 free throws, did they?
That's the Lichtman Live Sports Minute for you folks.
There you go. For the
Chris Wall says, I know you don't like hypotheticals, but this is pretty general. Since the popular vote leans Democratic, would the key still work if the Electoral College was eliminated?
That's too hypothetical. Probably so. I'd have to think about it. I wish we could eliminate the Electoral College, and most of the American people are with me, but it would take a constitutional amendment, which is impossible. The last time we've had a substantive constitutional amendment, you know what that was, Sam? The last
Let me think about it. Let me think about it. The last substantive constitutional amendment.
In the 70s.
Yeah, I know. Hold on, I'm getting to it. Wait, in the 70s. Let me think. Let me think.
As a young person, you should know.
Really? What? As a young person, I should know. Abortion.
Not even close. The 18.
Oh.
Right. So the chances of getting, in this polarized environment, 2/3 of the Senate and House to agree on anything and 3/4 of the states to ratify it, when the small states greatly benefit from the Electoral College, it's not going to happen. But there is something called the Compact of the States, which are states that agree, no matter what happens in their state, they will go with the national popular vote. The problem is, guess what are the only kinds of states who've joined that?
That blue states.
Only blue states, no swing states, no red states.
Jim Blowers asks, does the high vote for Nikki Haley in Indiana, 21%, mean Trump is in trouble this November?
It's not, it's hard to say because it's so early, but it certainly isn't a good thing. It's a bad sign for Trump, given that, she gave up her campaign months ago, and that she should pick up 22% of the vote is pretty telling. There is discontent within the Republican Party about Trump. Doesn't mean they're going to vote for Biden, of course, but, it might dampen turnout. Plus, we don't know what's going to happen if Trump gets convicted or if he gets acquitted. One way or another, the denouement of this trial will shake things up unpredictably.
One way or another. Nolan asks, does this trial, the New York Trump trial, I guess, have any impact on the keys? Does the fact a former president and a current president are facing off change the keys at all?
Nothing changes the keys. Every 4 years, people say, you got to change the keys. We have a black candidate running. We have a woman running. We have a former president running. Keys don't change. And you cannot change a model on the fly. Remember, the model is based on 160 plus years of American politics. It goes all the way back retrospectively to 1860 and prospectively to 1984. So I don't change it on the fly.
Our good friend Evan Budemeyer says, hey, Allan and Sam, do you believe the campus protests are calming down to a degree? It seems to me they are, but I want your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I know what everyone else knows just by, following the media. And I think we predicted this on a previous show that, once the students start to disperse, when school is over, they're likely to maybe not disappear, but at least to diminish. And Evan, that does seem to be the case right now.
Yeah, we're at 414 viewers. I think that might be our record. Thank you, everybody.
The donations and the members.
Yes, thank you, everybody who's tuned in. Subscribe, like this stream, become a member today. Andrew, our good friend Andrew, says, Allan, Gaza is consistently polling as one of the least important issues for Americans. Axios poll among students show Gaza very low as well. How can foreign failure key lean false in that situation?
I haven't called it false. I've said, it's still up in the air. There's a lot to happen in the Middle East, and I have not called the key false based upon Gaza to this point.
So are you saying, Dejeen Doreen wants to know, are you saying that it's not a major threat, the social unrest key at this point?
Well, there are two different keys at stake. One is the foreign policy failure key, and also the foreign policy success key. If he gets a ceasefire and gets the hostages released, that could be a foreign policy success. The demonstrations are a separate key, the social unrest key. They're related to what's going on in Gaza, but are not directly turned by what's happening in Gaza.
Yeah, Floor actually wants to know, if protest can flip two keys. You're saying no, protest can only flip one key, which would be the
unless, it's so widespread it causes Biden to drop out, or something extreme like that, which is incredibly unlikely. But basically, it's one key.
right. Speaking of Maryland politics, Obama Soda says, do you think Hogan has a chance, or is the media just playing into a narrative?
Well, the media always plays into a narrative. Let me say this about Hogan. I don't care what his views are. I couldn't care less that he's a so-called moderate Republican, although he's come off as much less moderate since he's been a Senate candidate. But leave that aside. His personal political views are irrelevant. He's going to be a backbencher, 1 out of 50 or so. He will have no influence on the Republican caucus. So he will matter in only one regard. And what is that, Sam? If Hogan gets elected, how will that matter? Big time.
His vote will matter.
Yes, he could turn the Senate Republican. And if that happens, assuming Biden gets elected, they're going to block all his appointees. Trump gets elected, they'll rubber stamp all his appointees, as we saw with Amy Coney Barrett being rubber stamped a few weeks before the election, and Merrick Garland blocked 8 months before the election. So all that matters is the R next to his name. So I would tell all my fellow voters in Maryland, don't be fooled. Unless you want the Senate to flip to the Republicans, don't even think about voting for Hogan. Again, I don't go with the polls, but early polls had Hogan ahead. I saw a poll today that had both Democratic candidates, Trone and also Brooks, ahead. Trone was 11 points ahead, and also Brooks was 10 points ahead. Again, I don't go much with polls, but I've been involved in Maryland politics since the 70s, and Maryland just doesn't vote for Republicans for national office. They've only voted for Republicans for state office, particularly for governor. So I think the Hogan bubble is bursting.
I just wanted to say real quick, just to tell people, I will be going live on my channel after this live. So if you just want to chat, the link to my channel is in the description, and I'll post the link to the video at the end of the chat, at the end of this live. Michael Kalikia wants to know, how do you gauge the economy keys?
They're specifically defined in the book. I'll give you the brief definition. The short-term economy key says there was no, remember, they're all phrased so an answer of true favors the White House party. The short-term economy key says there was no recession in the election year. And the long-term economy key says that real GDP through the whole term is equal to or greater than real GDP average during the previous 2 terms. So right now, both of those keys are true.
Our good friend President Belichick, who I believe is also a history teacher, a high school history teacher, also
Nice.
one of the many and one of the many presidents in our chat. Thank you for the milkshake money. And President Belichick would like to know, would you consider doing a series of weekly shows where you discuss the history of certain keys to the White House in depth, such as different periods of social unrest?
I don't think I have the energy for this show. This tax, I'm 77. I've got a job. I'm doing expert witness work. I'm lecturing all over the world. I've been to Hong Kong. I've been to Oxford, England. I've been to Sao Paulo, Brazil. I don't think I have the time and energy for another show, but feel free to ask questions which we can answer on this show. And as I said, a membership costs less than a milkshake.
Yes, sir. Jack Tioli says, hi, Professor. Do you think Mike Johnson started the end of the MAGA era?
Absolutely not. Johnson he's not quite as crazy as Marjorie Traitor Greene, but he's MAGA to the core. He was deeply implicated in the attempt to steal back the 2020 election, and his positions are absolutely in accord on everything from abortion to taxes to immigration with the MAGA movement. This idea that these mainstream Republicans, they aren't. The mainstream is now MAGA. It's not, Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney and, others of that regard.
Right. James LaGruta asks, how can Virginia Fox justify fighting anti-Semitism while supporting Mike Robinson as the GOP nominee for governor, who has a record of overt anti-Semitism?
Hypocrisy knows no limits.
Yeah, I don't think politicians are worried about being hypocrites. If they were,
you'd have to get rid of almost all of them.
Exactly. The Alex Tree.
But that is pretty blatant hypocrisy. I agree with that.
Not to mention, like you said, Republicans who are supposed to be about family values and conservative Christian values support Donald Trump, who is about as far as possible from any of those values, right? So again, I don't think any of them are that worried about being hypocrites. The Alex Treefire says, I am still fuming that Garland didn't indict Congress members that participated in J6. They asked for pardons for a reason.
I agree. Again, I'm not a prosecutor. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the ins and outs, but the historically bad decision that Garland made was to go after the small fry and either leave everyone out or, appoint a special counsel late in the game.
Charlie Felton asks, are there any economic sectors that could make Key 5 and or Key 6 true?
I don't really understand the question, but I'll try to answer it anyway. And that is, Keys 5 and 6 pertain to the economy as a whole, not to any individual sectors. Sectors could influence the economy as a whole. For example, the long-time depression in the agricultural sector contributed to the Great Depression of the 1930s. But the secret to the keys is they don't try to break things down into fine points, but they deal with simple, integral national parameters. That's the key to their success.
DJ of KC asked, does Trump being found guilty in the hush money trial have a chance to derail his election? He seems to slither his way out of everything else.
Yeah, again, it's not a hush money trial. It's a fraud trial, but that's fine. We will allow our members to call it that, even though I, rail against the media for calling it that. And the answer is we have no idea. It certainly can't help him. If you believe what people say to the pollsters, anywhere from 5% to 20% of Trump voters say they would consider not voting for him if he's convicted of a felony. Whether they follow through on that, who knows? But it can't possibly help him. It's another media myth. Oh, every time, one of these things happens to Trump, it helps him. Wrong. Ever since the trial has taken place, for whatever it's worth, because these people depend on the polls. I'm not, endorsing it, but, his standing in the polls have dropped. His lead is gone. The latest average poll of polls has it a dead heat, whereas, before the trial started, Trump was ahead. So I don't know what people are basing their idea that these criminal charges and possibly a conviction help him.
And Alex Miron wants clarification. Alex, this doesn't affect anything keys-wise. We've talked about that before.
That's right. But, as I've said, there can be cataclysmic, unprecedented events outside the keys that haven't yet, but, is a conviction of a major party candidate and former president so unprecedented, so cataclysmic that it could affect the election outside the keys. It also conceivably could affect the keys. That is, it could diminish support for the third party candidate. Trump is so bad, we can't risk, voting for RFK Jr. We got to stick with Biden. So it could have an indirect effect on the third party key.
Some Real News says Trump always does better than his poll numbers, 16 and 20. Right now, he's ahead in the RCP aggregate average in all the swing states: Georgia, PA, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina. How does your system account for this?
It doesn't. How many times, what have I said about the polls, Sam? time and time again.
Ignore the polls, ignore the pundits, eat pizza. I hear you say that.
Right. Definitely, advocate eating pizza unless you're doing like you are, training for a triathlon. You shouldn't eat pizza. But aside from that, these 6-month out polls mean nothing. And again, the most recent polls have turned. I saw one today that had Trump way ahead in Wisconsin. Saw another one yesterday that had Trump ahead in Pennsylvania. So remember, all you listeners, polls are snapshots. They're not predictors, and they unpredictably change and can change very quickly over time. So forget the polls, forget the pundits, keep your eye on the big picture as gauged by the keys. Remember how all the polls and all the pundits led us astray. The other thing that I would take issue with, respectfully, with what our wonderful caller suggested, is Republicans do better than the polling. Not anymore. In the off-year elections of 2023, the midterm elections of 2022, and the special elections of 2024, Democrats have way outpaced the polls. The most prominent was the congressional election in New York. For whose former seat, Sam? The guy who was bounced.
George Santos, not George DeSantis, to be correct.
George Santos. And a poll taken just a couple of days before the election had it as a dead heat, and the Democrat won by 8 points. And that's been a consistent pattern. Just this week, there was a county-wide election in Michigan, in a swing county, for I think the county commissioner or the head of the county, any rate. The Democrat won by 20 points in a swing county.
AJ Fallacious asks, have you considered collaborating with streamer Destiny? He's had professors on the stream before. AJ, I have reached out to Destiny directly, and I got no response.
Sounds like what happened with Nate Silver and me.
KA says, since every key combination hasn't been tried, how are you so sure each key is worth the same?
Because it's worked for over 160 years, retrospectively and predictively for 40 years. No other system comes remotely close to that track record. Plus, if you start weighting keys, what happens, Sam?
Shit gets funky.
Exactly, because the weights have to be based on past elections and the weights can change. Finally, if a key is big enough, it'll trigger other keys. So the Vietnam War triggered social unrest, triggered the loss of incumbency when Lyndon Johnson dropped out, and it triggered a big party battle in the Democratic Party. So by weighting them equally, I avoid errors and I am able to utilize trigger effects.
Did you ever cross paths with Clinton or Reagan? What were they like in person? It's so hard to imagine Clinton not winning the charisma key.
I have crossed paths with Clinton many times. Who's the other one? Reagan? No, I've never met Reagan, but I have met Clinton, and there's a long explanation of it in my book. Ordinarily, yes, Clinton would have turned the charisma key. The problem is, right from the start, and almost cost him the nomination, there was this dark cloud over Clinton. And what was that, Sam?
Monica Lewinsky.
Before Monica Lewinsky, Jennifer Flowers.
Jennifer Flowers, yeah.
And how many others, who knows? This whole dark cloud of womanizing, which nearly made him even drop out of the nomination. So otherwise, I certainly would have given him the charisma key. And I got to know him really well, and he is extremely charismatic and very much a womanizer.
Drop Cheek Elbow with their first super chat on our live stream. They donated $20. Thank you so much. They say Texas deadline is Monday for ballots. If RFK Jr. doesn't get on Texas, is that disqualifying and therefore key 8 true?
Key 4, I think you mean.
Whatever.
Third party key.
Yeah.
Well, Texas is not a battleground state, but remember, the only way I can gauge the key is on the national vote. And to the extent he doesn't get on the ballot, that makes it less likely that he turns the key.
Miles Wolf says, I'm interested in finding out more about what presidents were doing at my age, 20s and 30s, to prepare for success later in their lives. Any thoughts as a historian about sources I should use?
I have a whole course on this. It's in the Superstars Teachers. It's called Great American Presidents. It's a little old, but it goes through bios of presidents and does indicate, what they've been doing throughout their lives. And any standard biography of the presidents would, give you a lot of information about that.
Adam Brandt says, is it just me, or is it by now the worst start of a century in U.S. history? 2000 election, 9/11, Bush, Obama, Trump divisiveness. We didn't know how happy we were in 1999, I guess.
Were you around in 1999? I guess you were 7, Sam.
I was 7, yeah.
You probably were happier when you were 7. It's been a rough start. I wouldn't pin it to the start of the century, but let's not forget, at the start of the 19th century, the 1800s, right? We had slavery. Women didn't vote. We had the War of 1812, which burned the American Capitol. We had the former vice president on trial for treason. So, it's hard to make comparisons over the centuries, but don't despair.
Porsche Oscar. Dad, is it Porsche or is it Porsche? I've never known. Do you know? I don't know. Either Porsche. Porsche Oscar says, PA, Michigan, and Wisconsin unemployment at 50-year lows. Job creation 2 times what it was under Trump. Inflation below the national average and lower than when Reagan won 49. Any precedent of an incumbent losing to an equally unpopular opponent?
Of course. Both Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush were very unpopular for totally different reasons. And in fact, in the spring of 1992, Ross Perot, the third-party candidate, did something that no other third-party candidate had ever done. You know what that was, Sam?
No.
Beat both major party candidates in the polls.
Okay.
That's the most concrete evidence we've ever had of discontent with both major party nominations. I want to give our mom a plug, right?
We'll do that at the end. We still got more to go. We'll do that.
But I don't want to lose our audience before we do that.
We have 430 people watching. I think that's the most we've ever had. So don't worry.
All right. Soon.
All right, we can do it now.
I don't want to get in bed with your mom.
All right, let's do it now then. If you're super worried about it,
I am.
Start talking about it. I need to get the link.
So, Mom, our amazing mom, who was an Ironman triathlete.
Your mom, not your mom.
Your mom. Hey, you got to give an old man, a little.
You're saying our amazing mom. We don't have the same mom. You're my father.
Right. All right, enough.
Right, okay,
I get it. She's an Ironman triathlete, which is a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike, and a 26.2-mile run, 140.6 miles. She won her age group. She was number 46 in the world in her group in the international CrossFit competition. And she is now up for the title of Ms. Health and Fitness, but it's a popularity contest. So vote for Karen Strickler. I don't know how, but Sam does.
Yes, now I'll take over. I just pinned the link to vote in our chat. So if you click that link, it'll take you to the place to vote. All right.
All right, more questions. I'm ready.
Andrew Aguilera says, are there similar periods in history reminiscent to today's dangerously polarized political environment?
Of course. I mean, one could say it was worse in the 1850s because of the polarization of the nation over slavery, which led to the Civil War, which, based on today's population, would have produced many, many millions of deaths, not to mention all the destruction in the South. And of course, in the 1930s, after the election of Franklin Roosevelt, the nation was very much polarized. You heard conservatives call Roosevelt a communist, a socialist, that he was the puppet of his Jewish advisor, Felix Frankfurter. So yes, this is not without precedent.
Some real news. We've answered that question before. I think 2 episodes ago we answered that question. Let's see here. Our good friend Pierre Holmes says, did you see Marjorie, as he calls her, Traitor Greene, get booed by both Republicans and Democrats for her bogus effort to remove Johnson from the speakership? You see that?
I did. And she deserved every boo. You know, aside from her extremism, people forget, you know, what a horrible anti-Semite she is. Again, you know, another conservative exploiting anti-Semitism, claiming, you know, that there were Jewish space lasers out there, you know, creating havoc in the United States. Can you imagine?
Do you think Ted Cruz could lose in November?
You know, for 20 years, people have been telling me Texas is going to turn blue when, you know, all the Hispanics start voting. It hasn't come close to happening. Beto O'Rourke did come within a few points, but still, the entire state elected officials, including all the judges, everyone else, are all Republicans. So, you know, I'm skeptical.
Which presidential election do you think was the most interesting?
Certainly 2000, you know, has to be way up there as the most interesting. 1876, another contested election, and 1932, which changed the course fundamentally of American political history, and 1860, the election of Abraham Lincoln, which led to the southern states leaving the Union and the Civil War.
Thank you, Helen, for becoming a member. Barry Smith wants to know, can you ever consider a predicted win for the White House party with 6 false keys, or is the win impossible?
Well, I never say impossible. I can't prove a negative, but for 160 plus years, the 6-key rule has held.
There you go. All right. Let's take one more question. Let's take it from a non-member or a non-donation person. So if you're not a member, you haven't made a donation, get your questions in right now, and one lucky winner will get their question answered by my dad.
You're going to pick it.
How am I going to pick it?
Yeah.
With my brain.
Oh, good thinking.
Right. Also, I will be live after this show on my channel. I just put the link in the chat and I'll pin it to the top. If you want to come hang out and chat, come to my live. I'm not as political, but it's always a good time. Right, Dad?
Yeah, I don't think you're quite as intense.
No. Okay, let's see.
More relaxed.
I'm looking over these non-member questions. All right, here's a good question from Jamie Smith. Did the Dems outperforming in off-year and special elections indicate or foreshadow that they will have a good performance in November 2024 congressional races?
It's not a perfect predictor of congressional races, but it's a decent predictor. And you certainly would want to, if you're a Democrat, you'd certainly want the record we have now rather than, you know, a more dubious one. And as I said, perhaps the most positive aspect is how far Democrats are outpacing the polls. And that is a very good augury for the congressional elections in 2024.
All right, with that, do you have any final words for the people, Dad?
Yeah, you know, the Trump trial is far from over. It'll probably be another week or two at least, but it's going at a pretty good clip, faster than we expected. And one way or another, we're going to get an absolutely unprecedented result.
One way or another. All right. I will be going live on my channel, folks. Give me 5 minutes to switch things up here. Just wait for me there. The link is pinned. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a good Thursday evening. Say goodbye, Dad.
Bye. Remember, forget the polls, forget the pundits. Keep your eye on the big picture.